Salutations, my beautiful people, and welcome back to
Caddy's Retrospectives!
Which is the show on my channel where I spend 3 consecutive weeks explaining what I do on this show. So, you know what, just watch all my other previous retrospective videos because I'm fucking sick of explaining it. Yeah, you heard me. I'm fucking done. I mean, does anyone ever think about me? What I have to go through? You know, the things I've seen? Oh, fuck this, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going home. I already am home.
So, Sucker Punch were riding high on Sly Cooper's first adventure. The game ended up selling over 1 million units, boosted the raccoon to stardom alongside Jak and Daxter and Ratchet & Clank, and gained a very dedicated following wondering what a sequel could do. Was it going to be a Crash 2 situation where the biscuit base to the gameplay was simply tweaked and refined, or would it be a Jak 2 situation where there would be a complete nosedive in gameplay styles and tonality? Well, neither really. In fact, a bit of both happened. And then on September 14th, 2004, good lord, that's over 10 years ago now, I feel so damn old, Sly 2 Band of Thieves was released to the masses. How did it do? Well, to say that it did well is the understatement of the century because many fans consider this game to be the best of the trilogy. So what exactly did Sly 2 do? Well, it kept the familiar story structure, familiar graphic style, and few familiar gameplay styles, but that is literally it. This game is an entirely different beast altogether, and because of that, some even regard this as one of the greatest PS2 games ever made.
And what do I think about that? Believe it or not, I'm actually extremely in the middle of the road when it comes to Sly 2. I mean, do not get me wrong, this game is still a blast to play and I love it for everything that it did differently over the first game. But personally, I think it bit off a little bit more than it could chew. It did too much stuff that I think it couldn't actually keep up with for all the amount of things that it did differently. So yeah, might have a rare opinion on this front, but I actually do prefer Sly 1 over Sly 2. Come at me! But I'll explain what I mean and discuss more about it later. So, what's going on with the plot in this clot?
Right, the story. 2 years after the last game's very simple story, we then get this beast. The simplified version of it all is that Clockwork's pieces weren't entirely destroyed in the last game, instead being kept in a museum in Cairo, Egypt. The Cooper gang hear about this and rush off to grab the pieces, only to then find out that they were already stolen and that Inspector Fox and her new partner, Constable Neela, were there waiting to arrest the culprits. Neela hints at this new gang being the true thieves, known as the Claw Gang, spelt with a K and a double W because magical fairy dust. And with that, the Cooper gang head off all over the world, finding each member of the Claw Gang, beating them up, stealing their respective piece of clockwork, and then destroying each piece to seal the deal. Well, they don't actually. They steal the piece and then they just do nothing. They take it and then they don't destroy them. I mean, for fuck's sake. I mean, come on, guys. You know that this is going to bite you in the ass later in the story. Why don't you just destroy the pieces one by one? Is it because that you're worried about what the Claw Gang will do to the rest of the pieces if you destroy them? Do you think that that's your only ploy to actually get the rest of the pieces back? Is this ever explained? Why don't you just fucking destroy your arch nemesis before you get all the pieces together and make him whole and then fuck it? Ugh. So yeah, apart from that glaring omission, this sounds like a simple setup similar to Sly 1, but we are not near done yet. After this setup is established, we find out that the Claw Gang's hypnotist, the Contessa, is trying to find out where the Cooper wealth is hidden. Then different members of the gang trade parts of Clockwork to each other throughout the journey, and then we find out everyone is trying to rebirth Clockwork with each piece of him, and then there's a main leader to the gang who turns out to be a pawn in a bigger game of lies and treachery, and it all just gets a little bit too fucking crazy, and holy shit, he is still fucking terrifying.
Now, I don't really have anything against this plot majorly. I mean, it is more interesting than Sly 1, and it has a lot more stuff going on in the background to keep you invested. But there are some parts of this story where I felt like it just dragged on and 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 on.
Like, just for instance, in Sly 1, each hub world had its own fiendish 5-member, and they all had their little kingdoms, which you had to storm. That was it. In this game, you still got that, but you had more episodes, as this game calls them. More hub worlds that were ended usually after boss battles. That meant that a few of the same boss characters would actually appear in more than one episode, which wouldn't bother me so much. I mean, the more game is always nice, but the presence of the repeated boss characters was honestly pathetic sometimes. Rajan, you look cool and everything, but holy shit, you are given no screen time. Same goes for Zombie Jean-Bison. They are both awesome-looking main antagonists of 2 separate chapters each, one after the other, but they are given little to no build-up, practically no memorable character traits despite having great backstories, no interesting things to do or say before you fought them, and because of that, their chapters I felt could really drag on. If these guys were made more menacing, more memorable, then I wouldn't have an issue with getting through their multiple stages, but they were just so bland to me, and because of that, I always felt like the story itself halted and the pace crawled along in some parts, feeling more like padding than progression. Dimitri and the Contessa were my only exceptions to this rule. Dimitri because of his memorability, humor, and fast-paced first chapter that kicks off everything perfectly, and the Contessa because, well, just fucking look at her, she's hideous. But even the leader of the Claw Gang, Arpeggio, was pathetic as a main leader. I know that's part of the joke and everything, but the joke wasn't even that funny, and I figured that the leader of this entire gang trying to revive my arch nemesis would have had left some kind of an impact on me, even if it was played up for ridiculous laughs. There weren't any laughs to be had, he was just there. And for another example, there are parts of the game where Bentley has to run through with the gang about what they're going to do next, and so he has to run them through a slideshow with no music in the background, and these things can go on for over a minute and a half, and they can happen 3 times per episode. Doesn't sound too bad? It is when you play it, trust me, it gets pretty damn tedious. And again, this was something that was fixed in Sly 3 because they weren't anywhere near as long, and there was music in the background with those ones, so they were much more entertaining to watch. But not only that, I also think that they didn't improve too much on the character interactions either. The voice acting in this game is much better than before, and the actors really do get lost in their roles, so congratulations on that. And there was an exponential increase of more character and charm than in the first game, and the writing was much tighter than before. Not to mention the villains were just as menacing towards the heroes as before. But my problem, like the last game, is that the friends still didn't feel like true friends to me in this game. And even though the voice acting was much better this time around and much better acted, apart from Neela, I mean, what the fuck was up with her Aussie Brit Zealand accent?
You make it sound easy, Cooper. I had to carry your pathetic gang through that first set of heists. I was overjoyed when Arpeggio let me toss you in jail. I could finally go after the parts myself.
Oh, and Carmelita has a completely different American accent in this game, which I personally didn't like. I mean, the Latino thing suited her a lot better, I feel. Sometimes, despite all the good stuff I like, these guys could even be assholes towards each other throughout the story, and I felt that they were more hostile and patronizing than in any other game for some unexplained reason. Now, don't worry, this isn't a recurring, constant thing throughout the game, but it's much more noticeable here than in Sly 1, or 3 for that matter.
Forget it, you're not taking this seriously.
Yeah, I'm not. Look, Bentley, I know this is your first time out in the field, but you've gotta loosen up. If we're gonna get to those clockwork parts, I need you on your toes. So in plain talk, what's your status?
Looks like you're on your own from here.
I'm used to it. Thanks for the help. What? You think I forget one of the Cooper family's greatest thief moves?
Avoid getting spotted by the flashlight guards.
Jeez, okay, there's no need to be a dick about it. I mean, this is partially my fault for starting at Sly 3, where I personally felt that the character interactions were perfect. But after everyone told me that Sly 2 was the best in the series, I was very confused with how much I still didn't like the characters that much in this game. I'm also not too sure about Murray's lower voice.
So I hurry over here, and then all of a sudden, monkeys are everywhere. My hulking frame is too much for that puny rope. You go ahead and unlock the doors from the inside. I'll be waiting in the hallway to help you carry out the clockwork parts.
Makes him sound a bit too burgery, you know what I mean?
Okay, I've gone on about it enough now. I think I've pissed off enough people, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. I mean, I don't hate the characters, and I don't hate the story in any means. I just find it all extremely okay. However, the rest of this game, I don't just find okay. It's fucking awesome, the rest of this game, and I'm actually massively glad about all the things that they tweaked, all the things they changed, all the things they improved and expanded upon in the gameplay of Sly 1. But we can talk all about that later, right? So, let's talk about the presentation.
Visually, this game fares pretty identically to Sly 1 in terms of the cartoony cell shading, but the main difference here is with the environments themselves and the decrease in deep cartoony contrasting colors. Sucker Punch decided to take a much more realistic looking approach to their graphic style, slightly straying away from the bold, deep contrasts and luscious, organic, bubbly surroundings, and instead heading into the territory of more city landscapes, more buildings, more civilized and realistic locations. You won't find a ridiculous voodoo swamp in this game, instead you'll find a gothic prison island shrouded in darkness. And for any areas that look similar, like Jean-Bison's mountain dens compared with the Panda King's mountains from the first, the second game just made them look more grounded, less cartoony, more treacherous, and again, realistic. And I personally think this was a really nice progression to make this game stand out over the first.
Fun fact,
Did you know that there was originally going to be a level set in Monocle, which Sucker Punch even explained on a making of featurette if you beat Sly 3 90%? Well, I guess if you already did that, then you know that already. As far as everything else goes, it's the same look really, but with a few slight nuances. The character models have seen a huge improvement between games, and the mouth animations are nowhere near as unsettling as the first game. Everything just appeared sharper, more rigid, and a lot less, what's the word, globby in terms of the deep colors when compared to the first game. Music-wise, I also thought there was a huge step up. This game has the longest soundtrack of the entire series. It's expressive, dynamic, and it did everything the first game did, but made the themes more memorable, used more genres and instruments to perfectly encapsulate the areas you explored, and even though you hear parts of the main theme sprinkled everywhere throughout the adventure, it never gets boring to listen to because of how cool, collected, and catchy it is. This is one of the greatest main themes ever.
So... I guess we're gonna have to talk about gameplay, because that's the order of things. That's how it always happens on this fucking show.
Now, this is where Sly 2 completely blew people away. Even though Crash 2's jump from the first was pretty huge in terms of refining the mechanics, Sly 2's jump was monumental compared to that jump. Not only did it refine the mechanics, but it also added in so many more gameplay styles, and the only time Sly 2 felt like Sly 1 was when you got the occasional linear mission that played similarly to its predecessor. In terms of everything else, it's a different beast entirely. Firstly, Sly does everything he could in the first game, which is always nice, but the control was tighter and snappier than before. That and the hub world system was entirely different. Instead of having the hub worlds a single platform to reach individual levels, they were actually levels themselves in this game, with guards constantly patrolling to keep you on your toes and make you feel like a true thief invading an enemy stronghold 24/7. The clue bottles from the first game were now all designated at 30 each per hub world only, and that was pretty cool since it required you to search the ins and outs of every hub world you explored, which in turn allowed you to know the secret areas and brilliant vantage points to help you out on certain tasks and missions within the hub world. Seriously, these things were really fucking well hidden in this game. It would take me sometimes 45 minutes to go through a hub world to find all these things, and you will remember the ins and outs of each and every single stage because of where they were placed. With all of the clue bottles, you also had to go and find the hub world safe, which sometimes could even be hidden within special missions, and then entering the code allowed you access to the power-ups again. Oh, and even if you know what the code is on a replay or cheating, the game won't let you access the safe without the bottles anyway, so ha! The powers, once more, were all really damn useful and fun to use, and the fact that you could assign multiple powers to the triggers on your controller was the icing on the cake. Power-ups this time also used a bit of your power meter, which could be refilled by enemy defeats and such, and above that was your health meter. Yeah, there were no more one-hit deaths in this game, meaning a greater emphasis on enemy numbers, meaning the stealth and combat aspects were much more prominent this time around. Enemies here were much stronger than before, with even the weakest enemies requiring about 3 cane hits to take down, and the strongest enemies being, well, unfightable. They could only be taken down with a newly added stealth finisher, which honestly is the best way in this game to sort out anything, because once you raise the alarms in this game, you would be freaking hunted down. Like a raccoon in the woods. That's really sad, I apologize. Yeah, because of this higher stealth priority, this also meant that Sly now had a run button, because normally rotating the stick just gave him a slow prance. A slow prance that could allow you to quietly maneuver around enemies, sneak behind baddies, and generally keep yourself much more concealed and invisible around your foes. Something that was highly incentivized in the whole game for the most part. I mean, even the fact that more enemies use strong projectile weapons most of the time, the best course of action if you alerted the guards was to run away. And because of the more open-ended aspect of this game in the hub worlds, that was a more effective possibility than taking everybody on. But hey, that all may sound like it could slow the whole game down when you try and avoid everybody slowly, but because of Sly's equally fantastic acrobatics from the first game, if you knew where you were going, you could effectively, quietly, and quickly avoid everyone with the endless amounts of thief scents, links, and rooftops to run across all around you. Yes, this game had a much more open-ended feel than before, with each hub world acting as, well, the hub world, but you had to go and complete specific missions scattered all over the hub world, like a proper band of thieves. Some missions required leaving the hub world towards little sub-areas like the first game, and others required completing a specific task in the hub world. Anything from taking photos without getting caught, stalking someone and picking their pockets for keys, luring a beast from one area to the other, timed missions. I mean, there's so much more variety here, and the fact that there is so much more variety here meant that every hub world was expanded and made bigger and more interesting than the first to accommodate that. Also, the thieving prospect was a much greater focus here, because you could, like I just mentioned a second ago, pickpocket any guard during any part of the game, depending depending on if their pockets were flashing. This awarded you coins and random little treasures worth a particular amount of coins, but the coins didn't act as extra hits for Sly. Instead, they were actual currency. For what, you may ask? More power-ups! More power-ups that you could purchase from each safe house in the hub world. Yeah, that was another thing. The Koopa Gang picked out a little area in each hub world to act as a safe house, and the safe house was used to purchase the upgrades, help you lose a heavy alarm, auto-save the game, and wait for it, switch characters at will. This was probably the most glaring difference most people noticed at the time, because you could play as Sly, Bentley, and Murray in most, if not all, of the hub worlds. They all controlled like a dream, they all had their own perfectly tight control styles and agilities relevant to the animal that they were, and each had their own specialized and personalized abilities that allowed them to tackle any situation in the hub world in completely different ways, each with their own pros and cons. Murray, for instance, was the powerhouse rather than the stealthy type. He could lift heavy shit, throw heavy shit, lift enemies, throw or smack enemies, and was basically the strongest fighter of the group for heavy alarmed encounters. However, he was slow, not very agile, not the most power-up crazy apart from the combat upgrades, and not a great jumper. Bentley was the smarty pants gadget master in the gang, allowing you to fiddle with tons of different useful gadgets whenever you wanted, along with an awesome crossbow with sleep darts you have through the whole game, giving you a much safer and more experimental tactical edge in sneaking. However, where faster and much better at jumping than Murray, he was the weakest of the bunch, unfortunately. Sly, obviously, was still the master thief, utilizing the blue sparkly thief senses, the greatest speed and agility, including some power-ups that made him so much more nimble and able to traverse tricky places like the parachute and the amazing long jump. Love them! But he wasn't the most exciting with power-ups and overall strength. He was middle of the road when it came to that stuff. This all created an awesome dynamic that allowed you to play the exact same hub world in totally different ways each time, and whenever you got a special mission that required a specific character, getting to the mission point and accomplishing it in itself provided a totally different challenge and level of fun, especially if you got a little bit too comfortable with the convenience of rooftop running, bouncing, sliding, and climbing from Sly, which, to be honest, was more fun in this game because of how much tighter Sly's controls were as a whole. Fun fact. Did you know that this game was one of the first on PS2 to try out microphone-based stealth gameplay? You could plug in a USB mic into the PS2 and allow yourself to make noises into it to affect the game, which included distracting enemies, attracting enemies, and also giving away your position if you were too loud. Shut up! The amount of things this game did different is crazy. And what's great is that with a quick click of a button, you could view every single thing around you. All the mission locations, the safe house, and it kind of directed you by a little waypoint. It's very cute. Boss battles as well were much tougher than the first game, so that's pretty damn good. However, there were a few that I still didn't find too memorable, honestly. Dimitri was a great first boss battle, and the most memorable for me. Rajan was a tough son of a bitch, but nothing special. The Contessa was also very tough if you weren't very good with dodging, but nothing too epic, especially for her build-up. Jean Bizon was just exhausting. Keep running and hope you get the traps at the right time. Nothing else to it, very easy. Got stale for me very quickly, honestly. And Clockla was a decently epic final boss, but not a scratch on the first game as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I'm extremely sure that most of my thoughts I discussed today will piss a lot of you off, but that's honestly how I felt playing this game for the first time. And even though Sly 2 improved and added tons of shit onto Sly 1's basic formula, I think it tried to bite off a little more than it could chew in some areas. And that's also apparent in the length of this game. I mean, wow, the amount of things to do in the story length in general is at least 5 hours extra from the first game, which is fantastic. But I also personally felt that for this kind of game, even that outstayed its welcome. It's great that there's a lot to do, but everything gameplay-wise that was fresh and new and exciting to explore and discover was covered in the first 5 chapters of the game, and then to find out that nothing really changes for another 3 chapters mentally exhausted me slightly, especially with the previously mentioned issues I had with some of the repeated boss character worlds. Well, I'm sure everybody right now is extremely curious as to what I finally think about this game. What can I sum up with it? What are my final concluding thoughts? So, the main question is, does Sly 2 Band of Thieves hold up today? Well, honestly, my likes for this game massively outweigh the dislikes, so yes, it does. It's a solid platformer, a solid stealth action game, a solid adventure game. It's a damn good game. And even though this game does feel bigger and feel grander and feel more refined than the first game, I still think, you know, it went over its head a little bit on a few aspects. The gameplay here was the best that Sly Cooper had seen up to that point, so that's fantastic. But I just feel like everything else around it, everything wrapped around it, I just feel like it either could have used a little bit more tweaking or shouldn't have necessarily been included in the first place. And because of that, I would even say that Sly 1 feels like the better game because of all of that stuff. I mean, granted, it's inferior in many ways and many places,
but it has more drive, it has more focus, it knows more of what it wants to be than Sly 2 does. Unfortunately, I will not agree with the masses on thinking that this is one of the best PS2 games ever made, let alone one of the best Sly games ever made. But you know something? Kudos to you if you believe that, because I can definitely see why people think that. I can see where this game shines, and I can see why people love it so much. So you know what? If you love it, then fantastic. I really like it, but I just don't think it's as great as everyone said it was for me. And it doesn't really matter either way, because as far as I'm concerned, this game would then lay the groundwork for an amazing sequel.
Anyway, how does this epic story end? Sly and the gang retrieve all the clockwork parts, only to lose them. And, well, remember I mentioned a character earlier called Neela, Carmelita's new partner? Yeah, it turns out that she was with the Claw Gang the whole time. Oh, and what's this? She's a double backstabber, because she then fucks over the previously mentioned leader of the Claw Gang, Arpeggio, and takes the clockwork parts for herself so that she can become immortal. So Arpeggio anticlimactically dies, leaving no impact on me whatsoever, and Neela merges with the clockwork parts to become Clockla. And if that wasn't ridiculous enough, you have to remove a hate chip inside it. A hate chip. Look, I get it, it's cartoony and cheesy, but this is just fucking ridiculous. You can't go from badass scary giant owl to undefinably accented tiger girl merging with a mental owl with a new and improved hate chip explaining why Clockwork hates everyone so much. It's dumb. Very fucking dumb. But at least the boss battle is good, and a good ending to the game overall. However, in the midst of the chaos, disaster strikes. Bentley unfortunately loses the use of his legs, and Murray's soul becomes destroyed by the extremely bittersweet ending to the whole adventure. Sly also gets arrested finally by Carmelita, and then he begs with her to let Murray and Bentley go in exchange for his easy capture. She agrees to that, and so Bentley and Murray both drop their gear and sadly walk away, and honestly, I did find this whole scene quite moving, actually. Of course, it all ends with a bang as Sly realizes a parting gift was left for him by the gang, causing the police helicopter to spin out and Sly to escape once more for another great adventure, maybe, possibly, maybe. Well, that was abrupt for sure, and slightly sad, so with this bittersweet ending on the horizon, the main question is, how could Sucker Punch continue the Sly Cooper legacy, and how could they come back against the huge positive response to this game? And will anything be different by another installment? Hello there everybody, and thanks so much for watching part 2 of my Sly Cooper retrospective. I hope you enjoyed it. Part 1 is in the description if you want to see it, and I'm going to link to you some other retrospective videos that I've done in the past in case you haven't seen the series before. And I'm obviously going to link part 3 when it's done at the end of this slate as well, so you can click on that, and you can click on the little subscribe title up there to subscribe, because that would be fantastic if you do that, and liking the video as well if you enjoyed it would help me out a huge amount. Thank you so much if you decide to do that, by the way. Look in the description for all my social medias as well. That will be good for Facebook and Twitter and Twitch for my streaming and all of that stuff, and it's all good down there. And I'm also going to take this time to give a huge thank you and a huge shout out to my top Patreon supporters. So you guys, thank you so much. Nicole Ganara, Ahmed Al-Multawa, Tony Pierce, Mohammed Al-Sali, Alan Angert, Salah Tell, Greg Black, Benjamin Peasley, Brad Bird, Kylie McKinnon, Ferocious Toaster, and Travis McCollum. Thank each and every one of you for being amazing, and thank every single one of you at home for watching this video. And if it's your birthday today or watching this video, happy freaking birthday to you, and please remember to stay beautiful.